Hello and welcome to Study with Sudhir, your digital classroom. I had put out a video talking about the things that you need to keep in mind before you attempt your English language and grammar paper. But a lot of students seem to have a lot of doubts, several doubts regarding the composition, the 20 marks long essay that you need to write, and you are given 5 different types of essay, which includes an original short story, a narrative, a descriptive, an argumentative, and of course the picture composition. And I have done 2 videos talking about which composition you should attempt writing depending on what kind of a person you are. If you are an argumentative type, used to kind of participating in debates, etc., you should probably go in for the argumentative type. If you are the one who is good at descriptive or narrative, a more creative kind of a person, you should probably try your hand at writing the narrative, the descriptive, or even the original short story. But students are a little doubtful as to how the marking is actually done. Okay, how the marks are actually allotted, on what basis do you get marks, and on what basis do you actually stand to lose marks. So in this video lesson, I would essentially try to clarify for you on what basis do the ICSE board examiners. I spoke to one of the teachers who goes for evaluation, so she really the best suited person to tell about on what basis the marks are allotted or marks are not allotted. But before we get on to that, some of the things that I had spoken about, you need to decide beforehand what kind of a composition you will attempt. The next few days, at least the class 10 students before your exam on the 27th of February, please do spend time trying to practice some essays. Many students have been asking me to suggest topics. Now, it's a little difficult to suggest that because not many topics are really repeated. In fact, I hardly see any topic being repeated. What you need to do is to just practice writing, because if you practice writing, that kind of thought process will come naturally to you, and the kind of points that I will tell you, you will realize that even if you don't practice a particular topic, if you know the craft of writing, you will be able to actually tackle something like that. So we'll get on to that. But before you write, and especially in the 15 minutes that you get before the start of the examination, please ensure that you kind of organize your thoughts in your mind. Okay, these will be the 5 to 6 points that I will talk about. So that if you have that in mind, you will not spend time in between those 2 hours trying to think up of points. That is something very, very critical. That is something which you need to do. The organization of your mind about the points is something which you need to do. Now, what are the things that the examiners, the evaluators look out for when they check your answer scripts? Okay. First and foremost, now the length usually, what they say in the question paper is that write a composition 300 to 350 words on any one of the following. Okay, so that is the length which is sought from you. You need to stick basically to the length. Do not fall short of that length, because if you fall short of that length, that is actually seen as a bigger quote unquote crime than actually going over length. The thumb rule, generally basing on the general handwriting size of most students, is roughly about 2 sides of the sheet, 2 pages. Okay, that comes to about 350 words. The 350 could become 375, 380, maybe at a pinch even 400, but generally 2 pages is what most teachers look out for, assuming that you write about 7 to 8 words in a sentence and in a line kind of thing. So, but in case if your length is less than 300 words, you straight away, and if you have written just 1 page, you straight away will lose 25% of those 20 marks. That is, straight away you start with a -5. So please do ensure that you do not fall short of the length. If it's a little more than the prescribed length, as I said, about 375, 380, it's still okay. But I'll tell you the flip side of that a little later. But do not fall short of the length, because straight away you will lose 5 marks out of 20 if your length is short. Number 1. Number 2, which is looked at, is spelling mistakes. You lose 1/4 of a mark for every spelling mistake you make. So if you make 4 spelling mistakes, you lose 1 mark. If you make 8 spelling mistakes, you lose 2 marks. So be very careful about spellings in your composition. Understood? Number 3, we come to grammatical errors. Now both spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, obviously being an English language exam, the evaluators are naturally expected to be strict about it. Now as far as the grammatical mistakes are concerned, unlike Hindi where the first two errors are generally overlooked, here it is not so, they are more strict about it. The ICSE board follows something which is called an error frequency. Okay, now what is an error frequency? Now you make 1 to 3 mistakes, you go into an A grade. If you make 3 to 6 mistakes, you go into another grade. And depending on which grade you are in, you lose marks. So supposing you have made between 1 to 3 grammatical errors in your composition, you could lose up to 1 mark. If you have made between 3 to 6, if you are in that error frequency, B grade error frequency, you could lose 1.5 to 2 marks. Okay, so that is the kind of an error frequency grade which the evaluators are given. Depending on that, your marks are allotted. Okay, nobody generally gets a 20. There was someone who had asked me whether you can actually, what's the highest marks you can get in a composition. Usually nobody gets a 20, but if there is an exceptionally brilliant essay, even in that case, the chief of the evaluation table also will go through the same essay and check and verify whether that student indeed deserves the 20 which has been given by the first examiner. Okay, so it will go through a second round of vetting in case someone is really found to be exceptionally brilliant as far as the composition question is concerned. So 20 can be given, but it has to be really out of this world. Otherwise, usually students get, the really good ones get between 17 and 18. 17, 18, maybe a 19, but 17, 18 is generally the norm. Okay, that's taken. Then the introduction. Many students, especially for descriptive and narrative, have asked me what kind of an introduction they should write. Now, the idea is that because you do not have the the benefit of using too many words, you have just about 300 to 350 words at your disposal. So you need to delve into the subject pretty soon. You cannot spend an enormous amount of time trying to write a long-winded introduction. So your introduction has to be short, it has to be crisp, not more than 3 lines, and get into the point straight. That has to be your mission, irrespective of what kind of an essay of the 5 options you have chosen. The other thing which is actually frowned upon by the evaluators, for which also you can actually lose 25% of the marks, that is another 5 marks, is if you deviate from the topic or do not touch the topic at all. You beat about the bush without actually coming to the point, or you start from the topic but you then decide to do a Vasco da Gama or a Columbus. You go all over the place. Sorry, such excursions are not allowed during the examination paper when you are attempting the composition. So you need to stick to the point, which is why in the earlier video lessons also I have been going on saying, please keep reading the question. Do not deviate from the topic. Please keep touching the question, the topic. If you don't touch the topic and deviate, you will lose another 25% of the marks. Straight. So 2 things that they are very strict about is if the length is short, and number 2, if the student deviates from the topic. Does a longish, suppose instead of 2 pages, if the student writes 3 pages, 3.5 pages, what happens? 2 things. 1, the student would have made a mess of his time management. You can be rest assured he would have struggled to finish his or her paper, and the entire thing would have gone for a toss. That's number 1. Number 2, more specifically coming to this composition, it does not necessarily impress the examiner, because obviously what it shows is that the student is not able to think in a concise and a precise and a more focused manner how to put his or her thoughts into 350 odd words. So that is not going to necessarily impress the examiner if he or she is writing a very long-winded tale. So try to stick to the length which is prescribed. As I said, the thumb rule, depending on an average size handwriting, is about 2 pages. That's what the general thumb rule is. The picture composition I have already spoken about in the earlier video. You need to be very, very sure that what you are interpreting the picture as is absolutely the correct interpretation, because if it's not, your entire 20 marks could go for a 6. So be very, very sure, and if you are not sure, do not go for the picture composition, go for any of the other 4 options. Argumentative, this is a point which I mentioned in yesterday's video, in the video that was published this morning also, that do not argue both for and against. For heaven's sake, don't do that. You be either on this side or on that side. You cannot be sitting on the fence. Several students also make the mistake of writing one, after having argued for or against, they will write in the conclusion one very generic thing that, having said that, it is true that, this particular scheme also has its disadvantages. After having argued for advantages, also has its disadvantages. For heaven's sake, don't do that. Imagine you are on one side of the fence arguing for or against the motion. You cannot argue for the motion and at the end say that, well, against the motion is also actually quite right. No, you can't do that. So be very forceful in the argument that you are making. Don't beat about the bush. Don't sit on the fence. The number of points that are required. Obviously, we are talking about a 20-mark essay. It is not divided in terms of, intro ko itna marks milega, ending ko itna marks milega. It's not divided according to that. But obviously, you need to have enough number of points, at least 5 to 6 cogent points to make in an essay of 350 words. If you are talking of about 350 words, you need to make at least 6 points of about 50 words each, so that itself comes to about 300 words, and a short intro and a short conclusion that takes care of the remaining 50 words. That has to be your mentally the way you will break up in terms of words. You will break up. So for anything you need to have those 6 points very clearly. If you are writing one of those very descriptive or narrative kind of an essays, please ensure, as I mentioned in the earlier video, that your sequencing is right, your dialogues are interesting, your narrative is actually, just read it to yourself or think about it, whether such a story will impress you, whether you would want to listen to such a story. So that is something which you need to look at very, very carefully. So if you are a creative kind of person, you could go for either the narrative or the descriptive kind of an essay. So this is as far as essays is concerned. I hope this kind of makes it more clear as to what you need to do in the examination as far as the 20-mark composition. Also, the other point many students have been asking, let me say that in the same video, what is the order in which you should actually attempt your paper? Please start with the last portion, which is the grammar portion, which is where you talk about the preposition, the tenses, the question 5. The question number 5, which is essentially of 20 marks, please attempt that first. Put it out of the way. That should not take, ideally should not take more than 15 to 20 minutes. If there is any part you are a little doubtful about, just leave it, come back to it later. Then you get on to your letter writing and email and notice. Then go to the comprehension and précis writing, and finally allot half an hour very clearly for your essay writing. Do that at the end, because sometimes many students attempt the essay at the beginning and make a mess of their time management. Please don't do that, because you will end up losing marks as a result of that. So this is as far as the essay writing is concerned. I hope that's clear. Please do write a good essay. Practice your essays a lot, because that will essentially help you. Usually some kind of a topical question could come, which could be related to, say, pollution. It could be related to, say, traffic management. It could be related to the fact that, due to a lot of smog, flights are delayed. A letter writing could be involving this, about how your train was very delayed because of fog, or your flight was delayed and you could not attend the function. So an apology letter for not attending the function. I'm just just thinking aloud what kind of different subjects could come, but generally a topical subject, the possibility is always there. Out of the 5, a topical subject which could either be a picture composition related stuff, or one of the other 5 options may be an argumentative type. So thank you very much for watching. All the best to you. I hope it's very, very clear. Any doubts, write in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to Study with Sudhir. Thank you very much for watching.